Hello. I'd like to start this session by welcoming everyone, and particularly welcoming our guest speaker for today, the sound artist Cláudia Martinho. This session is a part of a broader group of seminars where the main topic is art, thought and sound. And we intend to present the different practices of how to reach knowledge through sound. Last week, Amina Abbas-Nazari presentation considered the sonic qualities of the voice for research and design practices. Today, we'll have the privilege to discuss the relevance of sound in Cláudia Martinho's artistic work. Cláudia is a researcher, architect and sound artist that uses sound as a tool to bring awareness and enhance the interconnection and interdependence in our living context. Cláudia Martinho graduated in architecture in 2001 at Porto University, and in 2007 she completed a master's degree in architectural and urban acoustics at Sorbonne University. Her practices began focusing on the perception of sound and how our architecture can influence the space interpretation. Then she moved towards studying the impact of the artistic use of soundscape recordings in promoting ecological awareness. An academic consequence of that concern is her practice-based PhD at Goldsmiths University with the title Oral Architecture Practice, Creating Approaches for an Ecology of Effect. The increasing complexity and size of contemporary human activities led to the necessity of rethinking the experience of living in balance with the environment. In urban spaces, sound wasn't a priority for the minds who planned the city. The economic strategies drove the choices of materials, shapes and spatial proportions to focus only on visual purposes and forgot the influence of the everyday sound in the way we live in public and private spaces. For Hollenberg, the persistence of using the same unfit materials as concrete and glass in architecture and having an unpleasant and diffuse sound experience appears to be deliberate. The sound artist and architect Bernard Lather also reflects about this problem and identifies the need of public awareness for, quoting, a knowledge of how sound and noises can influence, dominate or destroy a particular space. Identifying these problems, Cláudia questioned the role of architecture in the acoustic interventions. She then proposed the artistic metaphor to induce a collaborative approach between the different elements that produces sound in an ecosystem. In urban contexts, we can try to control, manage and differentiate sound sources. Furthermore, in rural natural space, we could have the same priorities, but in that context, another relevant issue emerges: the absence of sound that have been disappearing because of human intervention in the ecosystems. Cláudia Martinho's work deals with the environmental concern caused by the loss of biodiversity due to human action. She claims, "My aim is to contribute to an ecological approach in spatial practices based on the qualities of the sensory experience of atmospheres and the performance of the soundscapes." Cláudia aims for a cooperative approach that emphasizes and encourages awareness of the sensory interaction cooperation between ecosystems and their communities, human and non-human. So I would like to conclude this introduction by thanking Cláudia. And at this point, let's listen to Cláudia's presentation and keep in mind that at the end of this lecture, we have a Q&A session. So thank you very much for being here, and please go ahead.
Thank you, Vasco. And thank you also to José Alberto Gomes and Diogo Tudela for the invitation, and to Escola das Artes and everyone involved in the organization and all the team here. It's really good to be here. And my proposal for this open lecture is to do a presentation then on my research and practice. And we're going to listen to some sounds as well. Therefore, if you have headphones with you, I would suggest that you wear them, because most of the sounds are in a binaural format, so it's a better experience. And so I've been developing, as Vasco was introducing, an experimental practice with environmental sound and spatial acoustics, very much influenced, of course, by my background, which is in architecture and in acoustics. And so today, I'd like to share 4 experiments with you, from which will emerge methods and strategies. And in every project, environmental sound is approached as a creative tool in the spatial intervention. And as you mentioned, as a way to transform our human sensibilities towards the regeneration of our relationships with the environment. So let's start by listening and rebalancing our hearing. Okay, ears refresh. So, since the topic of these open lectures is knowing through sound, I'd like to introduce the idea of the sonic experience and the human engagement with sound as a way of knowing our environment. And although today in our society, in Western society, the sound experience is devalued and even depreciated way of knowing, it stands at the foundations of human wisdom, and such as in indigenous cultures or in some traditions and ancient civilizations. And acoustomology combines the words acoustics and epistemology to refer to a sonic way of knowing and being in the world. This term was first introduced by Stephen Feld, an anthropologist and ethnomusicologist that conducted fieldwork among the Kaluli of Papua New Guinea, who had highly developed practices of listening as engagement with the rainforest environment. So I'm very much interested in the sonic presence and awareness as potent shaping forces, and in how people make sense of these experiences. The one-way question, of course, why today in our societies the sonic experience and human engagement with sound is a relevant way of knowing our environment, because we're so driven by visual culture. But I would say that more than relevant, it is really urgent, because as we know, the environment is becoming increasingly contaminated. We know with unwanted noises, and it has a detrimental effect in many species' well-being, including ourselves. And it highly affects the quality of acoustic communication. And this influences all kinds of vital relationships. It also constrains the perceptual spectrum, and therefore we can't really, it changes the way that we perceive things. So therefore sound provides important acoustic communication about our surroundings. And the sonic experience is a way of raising awareness of environmental degradation. And as architect Ioannis Palasma points out, it is sound and unfocused, omnidirectional experience that makes us insiders and participants. Human engagement with sound and active listening may create direct connection, a deep relation with our environment, to apprehend a place's dynamics and resonate with its potentials. And this is the aspects that I'm interested in. So this is why then in my process of experimentation with environmental sound, I've been questioning this too, that you see that what kind of ecological strategies then and creative approaches could contribute to foster this idea of this acoustic knowing towards the transformation of our sensibilities, and also how to bring forth these non-human dimensions towards the decolonization of our auditory perceptual spectrum and regenerate the relationships with the environment. So I've been engaging my practice as micro-interventions in public space, I would say that way, to reclaim the oral qualities and sonic diversity of everyday life experiences. The interventions, today I'm going to present 4. They're all site relational, and they result in diverse oral experience, but they all seek to relocate our sensory awareness. They all involve fieldwork and location recording, soundscape design, architectural agency, installation or performance, and sometimes workshops with communities if the context is open to that. So I've been experimenting ways to open up the experience and transduction of environmental sounds which are usually imperceptible, masked or simply ignored, because our auditory perceptual spectrum is constrained and reduced by urban life. In order then to move our spatial practices beyond our anthropocentric spectrum. So as you mentioned, Vasco, the purpose is to reconnect to our environment, to value biodiversity, and to understand how different sound qualities shape our behavior and affect our well-being. So these 4 experiments that I will share next with you, they have different contexts, they have different scales of intervention. The first one, Shores, it happened in San Miguel. It's an island ecosystem, and the work was done with fishermen communities. But the passage took place in a greenhouse in the middle of the urban density of Lisbon city. In Giro took place in the city of Coimbra, but in a peripheral area of the city. And symbiosis and geometries happen in a forest ecosystem in the remote mountain of Jerez, which is the place where I live now. And there is a common approach underlying. And this approach actually emerged from my practice after years of practicing, and during my PhD research, which was based on my own practice. And these 3 dynamics emerge: the experience of a place, the resonance that happened within the installation, and the attunement as a result. So it expands as a sort of a creative process that I can just here explain a bit. Like the first step, this experience concerns the field work, and it involves always sound walking and field recording as a process of connection to place. And this opens up potentials and relations. It deals with this idea of the genius loci and the spirit or the sense of a place. And then the second step is a process of working with the acoustic spatialisation. It's a process of modulation of the environmental sounds that were recorded and what exists at the place. And this is done in order to enable a certain psychophysical experience. So then to open up communication channels and affecting multisensory variations in order to decolonize our senses, body and mind, into being more connected with our surroundings, so that hopefully it creates some sort of attunement, as this listening with the ecosystems creates this kind of encounters between us and non-humans and phenomena, and there's this idea of interconnection or intimate communication ecologies, and getting this awareness of vital forces and symbiotic processes, as I mentioned before, that are usually neglected in our everyday life. Also, I'd like to point out why, according to sociologist Artmund Rosa, resonance is an important basic element of human relationships. Besides my interest in resonance as an acoustic phenomenon, there is also this idea of resonance as opposed to alienation or isolation. And I quote, "Resonance is a specific mode of relation, a specific way of being related to the world, in which the world, or at least some segment of it, is experienced as responsive. Therefore, it affects and moves. Subject and world are mutually affected and transformed." So I find in this a good explanation in why resonance is important to transform human sensibilities towards making sense, knowing our environment, and therefore creating more empathy. What we know about, we care for it because we value it. So with this introduction made, now how is this happening in practice? So I'll start by this project in 2017. I was in a residency at São Miguel Island in the Açores for the Visible Places Symposium, curated by Raquel Castro. We were just talking about this with Vasco. And so my proposal for this residency was to draw attention to artisanal fishing as an important part of the cultural heritage of the islands, which has been drastically declining because of many reasons, industrial fishing, massive tourism, etc., etc. So I proposed to convert a boat into an acoustic shell and intervene in the harbor of Ponta Delgada to transmit a sonic memory of the fishing community as it travels through places and the vibrant ecosystems of the coast of São Miguel. So I spent there 3 weeks listening and recording around the shores of the island. So the marks that you see on this map are the recording places around the shores, always around the shores, and at sea, the little dots that you see on the left side. So I was very, very lucky to go on a fishery for the sardine that lasted 7 hours at sea. I say that I was lucky because women are not allowed in a fishing, so I was very fortunate, really. And in both of the extremes, I mean, in the right side, the Nordeste, is actually the only remaining of the endemic native forest with endemic bird species, the priolo, and then there's also the cagarro in the Ponta da Ferraria. And in the middle, basically, it's very beautiful, but it's like all green with cows, you know. So the shores are really absolutely amazing because they have these acoustics, very, very unique acoustics. So the emphasis was put on collaborative and participatory dynamics. We did workshops of sound mapping, sound walking, field recording with architecture students, and with the involvement also of the fisherman community of Rabo de Peixe. And as I say, there's a great diversity of sound environments. So after collecting sounds during the fishery and all around during these 3 weeks, I created a soundscape with 33 minutes in total. So then followed the process of the installation of the soundscape. And I've chosen the Ponta Delgada harbor and to use the acoustic space of a wooden boat that was left abandoned there with a few other. So I managed, luckily, it had an owner, but he borrowed the boat, so I cleaned it up, and I had also the help of a fisherman to do the boat installation. So they helped me to lean it towards the sea, which is the entrance of a small boat, and then I mounted a sound system in it with 2 speakers, one on each extreme of the boat. You see, you know, there this entrance, and then a subwoofer just beneath, against the wood. And the wood, as you know, it resonates really beautifully. So this boat was transformed into an acoustic shell and a big sound system. And I really like the work of Jean-Paul Thibault in what refers to the dynamics of urban ambiences. And there's this quote that really inspires me for my work, which is: "The act of modulation, different frequency fields, transforms an ambience dynamic and explores a form of receptiveness that links up with specific corporeal states and brings the senses into synergy." So this is what I've tried to do here. And actually, I only saw this quote after doing it, and I related it. But this, this installation modulated the harbor's environmental sounds mixing the sounds of the activities of the fishermen there, taking into account not only the sound system and the acoustic of the boat, but also the whole acoustic environment of what was happening. So the intention was that this boat angle and the relationship of the soundscape with the harbor sounds would cause some kind of a immersive and receptive listening situation, and also affected multisensory variations as responses because of the boat inclination. You really needed to be in a certain position, so the sense of balance, which is related to hearing, would also be affected. And this is the view from being in the boat. And we're going to listen now to some short excerpts of the soundscape. It's not followed, so it's like short samples, because the whole soundscape has 33 minutes, and you can listen then later on my website if you like. I also did some interviews with fishermen that were put there to hear with headphones, that they talk about how serious their situation and the crisis they were facing at the moment. So here goes.
Não, já avisei, não sei onde chegou ali e diz que aquilo ninguém diz para ganhar.
and this is how the audience was experiencing it. And whether I ask or I leave a notebook, normally I prefer to leave a notebook for people to give their feedback, because then it's more direct. And some notes were left, and so that I know what happened really, and if I'm on the right path, and if what I was trying to do actually happened. And yes, definitely, people got in tune with the fisherman environment, and I was also very surprised at the boat angle. People also reported that when they came down on the boat, they felt like being at the sea, really, like being dizzy because of this, these sounds happening, and because of this position. And so it was a really rich experiment that informed a lot on my way of practicing. So following this, on the same year, actually, following this residency, Raquel Castro invited me to participate in Lisboa SOA, that she's an art director. And this is an event, an annual event actually, on sound art, urbanism and auditory culture. And the aim of Lisboa SOA is to take citizens on a sonic journey to rediscover the city spaces. And each year the spaces are different. And if you don't know, I absolutely recommend that you go there. It's in September. The project, I entitled it Passage. And this edition took place in Estufa Fria, which is a greenhouse located right in the center, or in a very noisy part of Lisbon that you can see here in the green square marked. So there, when you're there, you can really clearly hear the subway infrasound, the vibrations between the ground, traffic jams, really, really noisy at rush hours, the airplanes passing every 10 minutes, but you're in this place. It's like enchanting. And so have these mixed sounds, because the ceiling is acoustically transparent. So you have all these sounds coming, but you're really in the middle of a human-made ecosystem with hundreds of species of plants and watering systems and stone tunnels and caves, like a very romantic design. And so again, the first step is experience the place. So I engage in a process, of sound walking and binaural field recording to amplify what was already there. But that was kind of imperceptible because there was so much noise invading the space from outside. So I recorded subtle forces at work in the place that, such as for instance, the infrastructure of the water running and through the channels. This actually was a watering system that was turned on early at 7 a.m. every day, but the public the doors only open later, so the public actually doesn't hear this. But it's like water everywhere, like a rain falling, and then the water flows everywhere through an amazing infrastructure of tunnels and canals, and slowly it fades away in the ground to feed the plants. And so this is like some kind of unifying field of water that is there and just fades away. So this is what I got interested in, because in each space it's such amazing acoustics with these stone caves and tunnels, and so you have these variations that happen there. So my purpose was to create an immersive installation, and I've chosen to intervene in a passageway that you see here on the left. You can whether at one point go up or down on a tunnel. And so I wanted to create some kind of active and immersive listening through acoustic resonance, enhancing this presence of the waters and the plants itself. So I wanted to create this connection with the elements, and also to use the effects of the tunnel, because there everything was amplified because of the stone. And this place, so I've chosen to intervene in this tunnel, it reminds me how ancient civilization used natural spaces and also build architecture for specific purpose with sensory variations of sound, but also of light and smell and temperature. And this is what archaeoacoustics studies, and I'm really fascinated by this deep knowledge that got lost and forgotten. So in this place, the presence of water was subtle, but yet it really became intensive and overwhelming at times. So I was inspired by ancient places such as Chavin de Huantar or Tiwanaku in South America. Actually, I had a chance to be there, and there's these amazing acoustic infrastructures of water channels. And according to Paul Devereux, it is possible then. Paul Devereux is, by the way, is an author, and he writes amazing books about archaeoacoustics. And it is possible then, when water was passing in, a deep roaring sound was made, and probably associated with an entity of rain or thunder, or as an acoustic matrix, where oracular pronouncers could be deciphered. This is an interpretation, of course, by Paul Devereux. And for this experiment, I wanted to try this acoustic effects. And so I've engaged in a process of designing the resonant soundscape, composing the soundscape in the place as well, based in the modulation of the recorded environmental sounds and its installation in resonance with the acoustic space of this tunnel of stone. So here in the plan, we can see the passage through the tunnel. And I placed two pairs of speakers, one in the entrance or in the way out, either way, and one subwoofer in the middle. So you had this low frequency sound in the middle, and this sympathetic resonance happening with these portals of standing waves. So this tunnel turned into an acoustic resonator. And it's just a technical note, just to reach this acoustic effects of a standing wave pattern. The primary resonance frequency between two parallel walls was calculated, and the results in 2 points. I searched for 2 points to get a resonant frequency between 108 and 110 Hertz, and coincidentally, or not, these are resonant frequency recurrent in ancient sites. And it has been investigated in the field of archaeoacoustics, as we see here. So prehistoric megalithic chamber sites in England and in Ireland, such as Newgrange that we see here in the middle, and this dates from 3000 to 100 BC. The tests were conducted by Devereux and Jan, and with acoustic measurements for their natural resonant frequencies. And a strong resonance at the frequency precisely between 95 and 110 Hertz was identified, with most at 110 and 112. Despite major differences in the chamber's shapes and sizes, this was the dominant, the primary resonant frequency. And Dr. Ian Cook of UCLA and colleagues evaluated the possibility that tones at these frequencies might specifically affect regional brain activity. So they conducted an experiment in which regional brain activity subjects were monitored by EEG through exposure to different frequencies at 90, 110, 130 Hertz. And the findings indicated that 110 Hertz, which this image shows, the patterns of activity over the prefrontal cortex abruptly shift, resulting in a relative deactivation of the language center and a temporary shifting from the left to the right side dominance related to emotional processes and imagery. So then, this book, Stone Age Soundtracks, The Acoustic Archaeology of Ancient Sites by Paul Devereux, I highly recommend. It's really fascinating field, and I think we have a lot to learn with ancient archaeoacoustics. So the result here, we're going to listen to a short sample of the soundscape. But of course, as the soundscape operated with these resonant frequencies, you don't really get the same effect. So it's not reproducible. It's only there in the place. But still, these are the sounds. So again, I left a notebook there, just so people could give their feedback. And it was very curious because there was this amazing commentary. Some people said that it felt like their body was really inside the wall with their ears out. And others really felt this no time, you know, just being in a certain dimension. And also, it really enhanced the presence of plants and water. There was someone that said that it felt like a plant for the first time and seeing with vegetable ears. And also how the stones, they felt like the stones were communicating between themselves. So in some sort of way, something was happening really. And there was this idea of acoustic communication and opening the spectrum and getting really this resonance with what is around you. It moves and it affects. So, and now I would like to move to another project, which happened last year in a different context. This was, as I mentioned before, in Coimbra, in a place called Convento São Francisco, which is a cultural center. And during the event Dar a Ouvir, which is also an event that concerns soundscapes in the cities and the listening of the city. So my proposal, actually, I was asked which space I would like to use, or to what I would like to work. And after visiting, well, actually, before visiting, I knew there was a cloister, and I always wanted to work with the space of a cloister. So that was my proposal, to do a sound installation there, to evoke the spirit of the place and its cosmovision, because the architecture of a cloister has a purpose. And with this geometry of 4 galleries, coordinated with 4 cardinal points, with 4 primary elements, and this is in this architecture, the idea was to unify all aspects of being: the spiritual, the psychic, the corporeal, and the social. It was like a very a cosmovision that here I wanted to turn into a not a vision, but a sounding. And so, but the reality is that what used to be a catalyst center full of life around a fountain with a garden and trees, and certainly lots of birds and insects, was now quite sterile, actually. There's nothing. There's only no living beings except occasional human visitors. So, but still, we don't see it. But after spending some time there, I realized that we can still hear the water that is there still once in a while when there's a cistern beneath the ground. And sometimes it's turned on, I think, a pumping of water. So the cistern is there. So I recorded it, and it's actually audible, but only sometimes it's 2 days or something like that. So I was lucky to be there at the time, and I recorded it to make its vibratory presence alive again in the galleries. So then I decided to explore the immediate environment. Here in this image, you can see that the cloister of the Convento São Francisco in the left side, it's not the one that has a garden. That's a monastery, as they call the Santa Clara, for the rich people. And then there's the San Francisco for the poor people. That's the story that is told. And so the small cloister there is the one. So I've asked people about what's there and what used to be, and I was told about terrain vague, just behind the monastery, up the hill, which actually used to be part of the monks' farm, and was now like a leftover, forgotten place, not completely abandoned, but really pretty close to that. And so I went there, and I go up there, right up the hill, for a sound walk, and it was a total surprise. It's a beautiful place. It's really high above the street, so you get like this sounds from the city beneath, And there's an incredible biodiversity and spontaneous wildlife just there, with actually olive trees, like very old olive trees. So it's kind of a remaining a connection with the monastery, but not part of it anymore. So I decided to connect this wildlife or spontaneous life with the monastery again. So this is what we heard around midday, the dominant soundscape. So it was summer, so many cicadas and other insects, but also a big diversity of birds, but mainly early morning or evening. So I spent some time there recording with binaural. And then I went back to the Cloister galleries because I really wanted to enhance this incredible acoustics of the ceiling. And so I've used my voice, you know, to explore it and to find some resonant frequencies at what would happen, because it was a place where monks used to give lectures or sing. So yeah, it was quite powerful, the way that the voice was amplified, as the space was made for that. And so then my idea was to create this continuous cyclical oral path around the 4 interconnected soundscapes, specialized in 4 galleries, and to value the cloister as a catalyst center, enhancing the revolving, meditative, contemplative movement, but also of relationship, what's around, and communication, like interspecies communication, reconnection, and also some kind of human transformation, because it's this space is really has a potential for that. And this is a sketch. I always have a notebook with me, so I did just a sketch of what I wanted to do in installation. I was given 6 speakers, and so there were 4 different soundscapes: the water, insects and birds, pure frequencies and voice, and then silence. So these were especially resonated with this specific psychoacoustics. And my intention was that this cyclic movement will become a means of attunement and sensibilisation towards a deep listening to multiple voices, you know, like a memory of the place, but also like connecting to this local biodiversity. And this is a recording that I made there, binaural, going around, like making the whole path. Okay, so we are approaching, this is the last project that I would like to share with you. And this one also started actually last year. It's called Symbiosis and Geometries. And this is it's ongoing. And this is supposed to be, it is a long-term evolutive co-creation based mainly in location recorded at Jerez, which is a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. This is the place, more precisely, the first residency that we did last year took place at the Mata da Albergaria, a forest that you see on top, more on top, the green areas really, close to the village, a small village that you see on the left side bottom. Almost you can't see it really. This is where I live now. And this, this residency and the idea of this project is really to get into what is symbiosis and what is ecology. So what is it after all? How can we work with it? How can we do something, collaborate, co-create with non-humans? And the book of Merlin Sheldrake called Entangled Life, it's mostly about fungi. He does a very short definition that I really like, which is ecology is the study of the relationships between living organisms, and symbiosis as the close relationships that form between unrelated organisms. And life is full of intimate collaborations. So this is where I wanted to get, Similarly, this project experiments with relationships between the environmental sound of specific places in the forest and the human creative process. How can we cooperate with its ecosystem and species? So this project, its creative process embraces sound art, musical and acoustic performance, ecoacoustics and bioacoustics. And from this creative process, the purpose is that the outcomes are performances, installations and workshops as well. This is a very important part of it for the participation and to take people into this intimate collaboration. And for this first experiment, so this project, I received a grant from the Ministry of Culture. And the first experiment, I invited the musician and researcher Luís Bittencourt, which is a percussionist, for a collaborative residency there that resulted as an electroacoustic performance. And so the residency took place in the forest, which, as you can see, is a very rich ecosystem with a huge biodiversity, and you will listen to it in a while, along a river of pure water. It's full of wildlife and amazing sounds. It's very rough in the sense that it's a mountain, but it has this amazing acoustics of the mountain and all this dense forest and these stones, these granitic stones and the river. So it's full of potentials, really. And so I've made multi-channel recordings. I use small sound devices recorded with multi-channel, so I can plug different microphones. And the idea was to get like a full spectrum of what's going on, and always as a point of listening of a tree, like an oak tree, what ecosystems are around the oak tree. So I've used this binaural DPA 4060 microphones that whether you can place on your head or just put it with this distance that create a binaural recording, or you can also use them to go inside like very tiny cavities. So it's like you're an insect inside a cavity of stone and get this amazing perspective from another being. And also I've used wildlife cameras. And you see on the images, for monitoring. And this AudioMoth open acoustic device, which is fantastic. It's very, very, very tiny, very accessible as well. And you can leave it there, and it records at the times that you want. And it records the 96,000 kHz. So you can get even baths then, and then you just resample. I've also used hydrophones and contacts. So yeah, the idea was to have a full frequency spectrum. Well, not full, but close to it. And so among the recordings are prevalent, the strong winds in the trees, the dry leaves, ants, lots of insects, and of course the water, birds, bats, cicadas, other insects, frogs. And so then this was recorded at different times in the year, different times in the day and the night. And the idea is also to have like a sound repository, let's say, that can be used later for more collaborations for the sound installations. There's also visual elements like fixed images with the sounds happening. And so it's ongoing, really. But for this residency with Luís Bittencourt, I've created these specialized soundscapes to evoke precisely some precise places and the beings that inhabit them. And Luís also came in the forest, he got immersed in the forest sounds, and then he conceived and built acoustic percussion instruments from found materials, such as stones and woods and leaves, and he also plays a lot with water. He also experimented, what kind of relation could I have with water fauna and water basins, and so trying to get this relation. And so we approached these vibratory and musical characteristics based on the composition was based on the environmental sound of the places, such as the spectra, the resonance, the timbres, and to get into this idea of a symbiotic relationship with the place. So this is a way to experiment this idea of ecological intimacy. And I really like this quote from Timothy Morton that says that attunement is something that has always been there. Ecological intimacy, which is to say intimacy between humans and non-humans, such that, we're born with it. It's part of us. It doesn't matter where we live, what experience we had. Once we get there, we feel it. It's innate. So following this was the live performance that took place in a Rural Vivo encounter of arts and ecology. And this took place in a small wood outside. And so these are short excerpts, again, cut excerpts, not followed, from the recording of the live performance. finishing with the night sounds. Yeah, so, to finish and to link, to this initial idea and this initial questions, about acoustic knowing that I ask, and I'm continuing to ask what kind of creative approaches we contribute to foster this acoustic knowing for a transformation of our sensibilities. And bringing forward non-human dimensions, of course. So I really believe that we need more experiments to enhance this innate capacity of attunement to self and to other beings through sound. And this idea of attunement really leads us to an acoustic understanding of our environment. As space is not empty, it's a unified field of relationships. It's not because we don't see that it doesn't exist, right? So space, things, living beings, us included, we are all interconnected through vibration, all interdependent. And we really, really, really are interdependent. So, we better care for it, And so this is what I had to share today. Thank you for listening. And yeah, if you like to make comments. And
Yeah,
it's always good.
thank you very much for your presentation, Cláudia. It was incredible. So at this point, I want to tell students that they have, if they want, the opportunity to talk in Portuguese and raise. You have a lot of raising hands, please don't be afraid of contact with us and talk with us in this class. So possibly I would like to start. Once again, thank you for the presentation and the incredible work, and congratulations for the incredible work.
Thank you.
You are talking about the symbiosis. You use very different sound sources, and you use your field recordings, and some sounds are clearly understandable, the source, and then you use your maybe your oral architecture practice, and you look for resonances and frequencies that has physical impact. Do you consider that they have different relevances to achieve that symbiosis that you think that someone that listen your work should feel, or your intent is to show that symbiosis, that interconnection? Do you think that they have different relevances, the different kind of sounds of sources that you use?
You mentioned the sounds and the acoustics, right?
Yeah.
The relation between both, how this relationship enhances this idea of symbiosis.
Yeah, but do you think that they are some sort of different sources? Do you think that they have different relevances to have the physicality of the symbiosis, or to increase the feeling of the symbiosis?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the acoustics enhances the experience of something, right? And well, the sound sources, sometimes you don't really, whether they are masked by other sounds, whether you just don't pay attention, whether, because we are not used anymore to use to listen, really. And so for me, the acoustics is a way of enhancing the presence of what is already there. And by recording and by making a relation with the acoustic of the place, it's like giving them the voice, really, and like giving them the space they deserve. So this is the idea of to create this interconnection. Yes, really, like work together. No, not against it, but like cooperate. So yes, this idea is really to create a situation that one can experience more deeply what is there or close to the place. So it's always site relational, it's not disconnected.
Yeah, and in this project, You told us that you have like collecting data and being collecting data. Have you already have results in your piece, the extinction calls? Do you have like species that are in danger? In your recordings in this project, have you already managed to find some sound pressures that there wasn't there, or new anthropogenic influence that changed the ecosystem in there?
Well, actually, yes. You know, it's more like for instance, one example. One summer, 2 years ago, I've recorded where I live. You know, I like to record like close where I live because monitoring the same places, is a way of seeing. Like Bernie Krause really works a lot in that. And you know, if you do it like seasonal recordings, and you see the differences, and there are differences. There are obvious differences. For instance, in the place where I live, I recorded this last sounds that you heard, the frogs, like beep, 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 beep. These are frogs. And in 2019, there were plenty of it. And last year, not in the same places, I mean, really less than the other year. And, you know, I'm not a biologist, therefore I'm not really making this in depth, but I would like to make this kind of collaborations, you know, that, you know, to provide, at least to provide this data, because there are other people working in the field, but, and there are people that are monitoring, but not acoustically monitoring. And the acoustic monitor is really a non-invasive way of seeing how the degradation of an environment, and that is something that I actually am quite interested in. And as for endangered species, there are loads of them, but they're not easy to record, such as the wolves, for instance.
Yeah, of course.
And also the eagles. You know, you see them. No, actually, eagles, you see them, but it's not that very easy to have. You really have to have the right equipment and all that. But this is. Yeah, that's definitely something that I'm interested to take it in a long term. I think this kind of projects only make sense if you do it in a long term, and to involve other people, to involve all kinds of fields and the inhabitants of the place, so that they can become more sensitive, you know, to, because I believe that when it's this you know, this thing that it's even in the documentaries of David Attenborough, for instance, you know, when you see or when you hear, you really realize what's happening. If you don't see, you don't know, you know. So you don't hear.
Okay.
You know less.
So let's try to open the conversation. So Diogo Tudela is right of front. So go ahead, Diogo.
Hi, hello Vasco, and hello Cláudia. Cláudia, thank you for your talk, and Vasco, thank you for your moderation. By the way, Vasco, awesome shirts.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Me
Cláudia,
too, definitely.
So Cláudia, during your talk you mentioned the notion of intervention and resonance as a mode of mutual interference, of constructing and being constructed by. I think that one of the main challenges of working on, in, by, or through ecology is how to bypass a modern Western notion of nature as an external, static, and ultimately inoperative background or landscape. Thus, precisely, Timothy Morton's call for an ecology without nature, right?
Yes.
It seems that your work clearly avoids such trap, which is awesome. So I would like to ask you if you could expand on the subject, mainly because this is a discussion that has been brought up with students in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Diogo. Yeah, precisely. Yeah, this idea of also Timothy Morton mentions this idea of a symbiotic real, right? You know, not nature, but you know, the symbiotic real, and there is no hierarchy, right? It's no entities on top of the other. We're all interdependent, and you know, this virus is here also to show us that. I suppose, you know, really, and. There's no such thing as something outside, you know. This is how in education, and you know, the story goes from a long time. We have been all educated in this idea that it's inferior, it's outside, it's an object, and we should treat it that way. So keep it outside. But no, we're part of it, and if we're not part of it, then we become ill, really. And this is what this is the kind of relation that we are it. You know, we are the planet, we are the world, we are. It's not even something. I think that through this experience, you really get to this sense, and it's like just a little thing that, and through the sense of resonance, you know, the physical resonance, the entrainment, you really is as if your rhythms get attuned again on the right frequency, right? Not the air conditioning or this or that, but like really of the planet. You know, it's simple, but it's really something that we need to extend further into public spaces, into the cities, and people really like it. You know, people really enjoy it a lot to go to the parks, and so we need this kind of interventions in public spaces. I keep on saying this.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cláudia.
Thank you, Dio.
Do you think that maybe do you think that we can use the kind of works to increase these places permanently, not only in specific time of presentations? Do you think what do you think is the role of sound art in the public space or in public art or building a place? Do you think that they have an important role?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think that cities were not always like that. There were other concerns. You know, you can find some, you know, in urban planning, like I'm not going to ancient civilizations, like recent urban planning before industrialization. There was this concern of, you know, the water in certain place and how the streets were creating this kind of involvement. Well, that's not being nostalgic, right? It is what it is. And yes, sound art can make a difference because it really intervenes in the spectrum, in the perceptive spectrum, and the quality, you know, the quality of the experience. It changes the quality of an experience. There are some permanent installations, not enough, but yes, they are. And this is at the same time, it's a very delicate subject, you know, because suddenly artists can get very egocentric and do whatever they like, and then it disturbs. I think it should be absolutely participative with the inhabitants that live in those places, you know, to involve people in it. And this you make further steps, you know. It's not like, oh, I'm the artist, I'm going to do this, and you have to enjoy it now. But more like, okay, what do you think? So sound walking and doing like this kind of initiatives, like Ildegard Westercampus mentioned the other day that they did this recurrent sound walking in Vancouver, and this was happening like regularly, and then there's this group created, like a club, no, but people that came along, and this at the same time this created not like a therapy, but almost, you know, that you really go to places and you exchange about these places, and then you appropriate of your own spaces, and then, of course, then you can you know, bring out sound artists after this work is done and create interventions with them. I think this is a good way to change.
So, sorry, Vasco, go ahead, please.
Alô, eu faço a pergunta em português ou em inglês?
Sim,
Como preferis.
Okay. Olá aos dois, boa tarde. Eu queria saber como é que é o teu processo de gravação de som, que microfones usas, exatamente quais, só para eu poder notar e saber. Mais ou menos como é que é feita a gravação e como é que é a disposição dos microfones, por exemplo, naquele túnel das pedras. Eu fiquei curioso por saber como é que aqueles sons tão estranhos surgiam. Isso tinha a ver com a colocação dos microfones e a qualidade dos microfones, não sei. Por isso era mais uma pergunta técnica e obrigado.
Obrigada, Vasco. Sim, pois, depende muito do contexto, o tipo de microfones, mas há os meus preferidos, claro, que gosto muito de usar os DPA 4060, são aqueles que têm aquelas cápsulas minúsculas, mas muito potentes, são omnidirecionais. E nesse projeto foi precisamente o que foi usado, foi o que eu usei. Basicamente, também, acho que também houve uns hidrofones, mas foi mais esses, essencialmente, que têm a vantagem de poder aceder, como estava a dizer há pouco, por exemplo, a cavidades mínimas com gotinhas de água, pões lá a cápsula e de repente é como se fosse uma formiga ouvir, bom, não uma formiga porque não houve assim, mas um mini ser humano lá dentro. E então esse posicionamento dos microfones tem muito a ver também com a nossa escuta. Antes de gravar, é estar a escutar. E estar a escutar, aproximar, entrar em lugares e então sim, depois gravar. Esse lugar é muito particular porque tinha montes de grutas e túneis e variações, então a uma dada altura ouvia-se imensos infrações que era do metro passar por baixo e depois são momentos, não é? São aqueles momentos que, uau, consegui gravar isto que fiz e sai assim mesmo algo que... Outra coisa também que quero referir é que estou a ver se eu não estou em erro, mas eu não uso efeitos na composição. O que se ouve é a acústica das gravações. E isso é uma coisa que para mim é mesmo importante, em não estar a alterar o som. Alterar também pode ser um pouco, não é? Tipo, algumas frequências, pode-se usar para tirar algumas frequências e tornar outras um pouco mais audíveis, mas não por aqueles efeitos tipo que também são válidos noutros casos, mas neste caso eu gosto muito de gravar acústicas precisas. Quanto a gravadores, adorava ter um Sonosex, mas não tenho. Nessa altura tinha um Fostex e agora um Sound Devices com 6 entradas, o que é super prático, é pequenino, eu gosto de coisas práticas porque gosto de estar leve. E é isso, nesse caso foi isso que foi usado. Respondi à pergunta.
Sim, obrigado.
Obrigada a ti, Vasco.
Yes.
So, Karina, please go ahead.
Olá, boa noite. Primeiro eu queria agradecer a Cláudia pela conversa, achei muito interessante o trabalho. E segundo, queria fazer uma pergunta em relação ao que foi dito no começo, a pesquisa, essa questão decolonial que circunda o seu trabalho. Eu acho que, enfim, eu sou brasileira e sou formada em artes visuais, e essa questão decolonial tem sido muito tratada, principalmente em como a imagem, os símbolos, né, e essas questões, até as cores, todas as construções plásticas, existem uma questão colonial ainda muito forte. E eu queria saber como que isso acontece dentro do som, dentro dessa percepção do som, e como é possível criar essa percepção decolonial da questão sonora. É isso, obrigada.
Obrigada, Karina. Esse é um aspecto muito importante, na verdade, porque embora eu acho que depende muito do nosso contexto para nos darmos conta até onde é que estamos colonizados, não é? Até onde é que estamos condicionados, desconectados dos lugares e movidos por esta força capitalista, de territorialista. Enfim, há montes de teorias sobre isso e na prática o que vemos ou o que ouvimos neste caso, são espaços homogéneos, muito genéricos, que formatam as nossas experiências físicas dos espaços onde nos movemos. Então, estar numa cidade aqui ou no outro lado do mundo, por vezes, é exatamente igual o tipo de experiência sonora que vamos ter, muito devido à forma como o espaço é construído E tudo isso é como que o nosso espectro auditivo é colonizado por este tipo de desenho, de design, de todas as formas, não é? Depois temos esta apropriação, não é? da criação. No caso da arquitetura é algo que é muito impactante, porque condiciona o nosso dia-a-dia totalmente. O Bernard Lettner, que estavas a falar há pouco, Vasco, já há muito tempo que vem dizendo isto, que a arquitetura moderna invadiu o mundo, não é? E condiciona totalmente a nossa experiência acústica e habitua as pessoas a que a qualidade acústica é estar enterradas em salas de betão, como nós estamos. Não, mas estar num espaço fechado e com depois um sistema de som de alta fidelidade para tornar os espaços mais vivos. Então, estamos isolados. E isto é uma coisa que eu penso que todos nós nos apercebemos o quanto, agora durante a pandemia, não é? Estamos fechados em casa, o quanto nos faz falta ter uma relação com o exterior, não é? E esta permeabilidade da arquitetura era algo que até à industrialização, até esta espécie de, não é, de força capitalista, colonialista, de apropriação de tudo como objetos e de rentabilizar, etc., etc., a história. Até essa altura, os espaços eram concebidos de outra forma. Havia uma simbiose entre as artes, havia um conhecimento muito concreto do que é a acústica e, no meu caso, naquilo que é a minha educação, não é? Em arquitetura, apercebi-me disso, que perdeu-se esta forma de experienciar o espaço de uma forma mais integral, não é? Com todos os sentidos, com o corpo. E estamos muito só a olhar para um desenho, para uma forma, para um objeto, para o bonito e depois constrói-se e depois as pessoas que, não é? Vivem em objetos sem qualquer relação com o que se passa à volta. Então, sim, respondi à pergunta, Karina.
Sim, acho que sim. Obrigada.
Obrigada.
Leonor?
Olá, queria primeiro parabenizar a Cláudia pelo seu trabalho. Acho que é muito interessante e é muito interessante ver artistas com esta preocupação de nos ligar mais à biodiversidade. Queria perguntar como é que é feita a escolha e como fala também tanto de arquitetura, como é também uma das suas bases, como é que faz a escolha para o local onde vai expor o seu trabalho? E como é que como é que faz a escolha também para destacar ainda mais alguns dos sons que serão relevantes?
Obrigada, Leonor. Sim, a escolha é pela experiência do lugar mesmo. Então, tudo depende do contexto, tudo depende... Cada projeto é um projeto, cada lugar é um lugar, cada contexto é um contexto, as pessoas, o que se passa à volta, o tipo de evento, tudo isso vai influenciar o que é que o lugar, por assim dizer, para uma instalação. Então vai depender muito do contexto. Por isso é que eu digo que esta ideia não sei como traduzir em português, site relational, mas é relação, um trabalho que é em relação com o lugar. Não? Mas sim, essencialmente o que procuro sempre quando estou num lugar é escutar, é sentir, é passar tempo. Acho que isso é uma parte muito importante. É difícil, à distância, decidir o que é que se vai fazer. É ir, estar, conversar, passar tempo, voltar, diferentes horas, diferentes momentos. Se houver essa possibilidade, e então, consoante o que se for sentindo, é muito assim nesta ordem também do que é que está a acontecer. Mas a acústica, sim, é uma das coisas principais, é um dos aspectos principais que me leva a escolher um lugar e não outro. Não é? É pela qualidade, certas qualidades que nesse lugar há um potencial para ampliar a percepção de algo. Então é por aí. Respondi, Leonor?
Sim, muito obrigada.
Obrigada.
Francisco?
Olá, obrigado pela conferência. Eu queria perguntar, disseste que era importante a relação com o público, a participação e que fazes workshops, e eu gostava de perguntar em que é que consistem esses workshops e como é que trazes o público para a Soundscape que crias.
Obrigada, Francisco. Sim, neste caso, por acaso, só um dos projetos é que teve um workshop, como estava a dizer, tudo depende da abertura e do contexto, se é possível ou não. E gosto muito, mesmo muito. Acho que é uma parte do mais importante que possamos fazer também. E este trabalho com as pessoas, de levá-las a escutar, dependendo, mais uma vez, do contexto, mas passa muito assim pela escuta, por práticas de escuta. Há várias práticas que podemos inventar, muitas formas e modos de escutar e de nos sensibilizar para um lugar. Tudo depende do lugar. Depois, consoante o lugar, consoante as pessoas, há certas práticas que podem ser muito dinâmicas e participativas e envolventes e neste exemplo nos Açores foi com estudantes de arquitetura que para eles era como para a maioria, não é? Era um aspecto que nunca tinham abordado e então ficaram super contentes com esta oportunidade. Tipo, vamos ouvir, mas ouvir para quê? Então de repente ouvir tornou-se como uma descoberta, uma redescoberta. E depois também, para além de escutar, depois também dependendo, não é, de com quem é que estamos, se é com crianças, se são pessoas que já estão mais especializadas e querem aprender a gravar. Então pode ser dentro ou jogos ou técnicas muito específicas de gravação também. E isso, de criação, também podemos ir em vários dias, desde um processo até outro, até à instalação. Então é isso, depende muito do contexto, mas é um aspecto muito importante, eu penso, porque a educação é fundamental. Esta sensibilização, abrir-se tanto a pessoas que já conhecem como a que não conhecem. Há todo tipo de práticas para todo tipo de público. E, Francisco.
Sim, obrigado. Queria também perguntar se pudesse fazer uma follow-up question. Falaste da educação, da arquitetura. Se consideras que seria importante para a formação de um arquiteto ter alguma base de som para poder pensar os espaços de forma a permitir um contacto, uma permeabilidade entre interior e exterior, ou mesmo desenhar para que os espaços tenham alguma característica sonora e não seja simplesmente um estúdio?
Absolutely. Sim. Esse aspecto que estás a falar da educação na arquitetura, penso que dependendo do lugar, dependendo da instituição, dependendo da escola, há diferentes abordagens, mas a minha experiência não foi assim uma grande abertura a outra coisa para além do visual, a não ser no primeiro ano. No primeiro ano, sim, fomos para a rua, mas desenhar. Pronto, essencialmente era desenho, o que é bom, porque passamos muito tempo cá fora e é outra forma também e é esta ideia de o que é o genius loci também, sentir o espírito do lugar. Nesse aspecto, sim. Mas o que eu quero referir aqui é que existem lugares, existem escolas como, por exemplo, a Escola de Arquitetura de Grenoble e o Cresson, que é o Centre de Recherche sur l'Environnement Sonore, onde o Jean-Paul Thibault está. É uma equipa pluridisciplinar, multidisciplinar, e têm desenvolvido ferramentas incríveis mesmo. Têm não só softwares para arquitetos, que permite, por exemplo, fazer simulações de gravações de ambiente e depois simulação, mais até para apresentar a um cliente, por exemplo, não é? Para ver a diferença que há, porque realmente eu acho que aqui não existe culpa, não é? O arquiteto tem sensibilidade, ele tem sensibilidade ao ruído, tem sensibilidade, todos temos, não é? E eu penso que é mais depois toda essa dinâmica de como convencer quem está a investir em que é necessário ter certas qualidades, certos materiais e certas geometrias e porque essas e não outras. E então, sim, acho que também na educação há outro tipo de práticas que são importantes de sensibilizar. Por isso é que eu também procuro, quando tenho a oportunidade de fazer oficinas com estudantes de arquitetura.
Obrigado.
Obrigada.
Filipe?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
First and foremost, I would like to echo my thanks to Dr. Vasco for your moderation this session and to Dr. Claudia for everything that you brought to us to consider and think about. It's a deeply interesting subject. I wanted to pick up on the idea of symbiosis through sound and what you mentioned previously about experiencing space in a more complete sense. Electric vehicles are becoming more prevalent, and due to the fact that government and car manufacturers are pushing in that direction, the urban soundscape as we currently know it will change increasingly in the coming years. So I would love to know your thoughts on how this will affect our relationship with urban spaces through sound, firstly, and secondly, what would you consider as the artistic potential in this shift? Thank you.
Thank you. Just to see if I understood well, you mentioned electrical cars, really, and the impact that it will make to reduce the noise, is it?
Yeah, essentially every changes that will occur based on their increased use in urban spaces.
Well, it will change a lot. I think that we had this opportunity to experience that during the lockdown, and we realized that the lack of vehicles, motorized vehicles, completely changes not only our perception of space, but also how other beings communicate or are more able to communicate between them. And suddenly cities become places that are much more pleasant. There are many projects that happened during this lockdown in recording the soundscape, such as the Cities and Memory, if you would like to check that. Also, we did with the Aldira project a workshop in which we asked people to give their contributions with recordings. And it was absolutely amazing to hear places, as people mentioned, as they didn't listen since their childhood. Like the same place without cars changes completely. And it becomes suddenly a place where you have other beings that come, and I think that, I cannot predict what will happen, but certainly cities will become much more pleasant in a way. And I'm not sure that the electrical cars will be silent. I think there will be other disturbance. I'm very positive about that, but we have also to remind that cars do need to make some sounds so that we are aware of their movements. So there will be sound. I mean, it won't be silent, and silence doesn't exist anyway. But then I think there's a potential there in that what kind of quality do we want that these electrical things do? Not like air conditionings, I hope. But, let's see. I think there's a creative potential there. And it's a really interesting issue that you raised. Thank you.
So, Cláudia, thank you. Thank you very much for being here and for an incredible presentation. So, your professor, José Alberto Gomes, asked me for finishing to remind you that at 8th of April, you will have Miguel Carvalho with computational listening. Sorry. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Cláudia, and see you.
Thank you all. Obrigada.